The frost on the metal evidence locker door felt like a silent warning when investigators finally unsealed the encrypted backup drive recovered from the abandoned storage unit, revealing a folder marked only with December timestamps and one final unnamed file that would reroute everything they believed about the disappearance. If you like stories like this, make sure to subscribe and like the video. The file, despite its plain naming, became the most consequential digital artifact in the Oklahoma City investigation of late 2003. It emerged after months of cold leads, archived interviews, and a fatigue that wore on detectives who had first handled the missing person report a week before Christmas. The story was defined by one season in particular: Snowden sidewalks outside early closing department stores, tree lights blinking in neighborhoods that still sent out holiday cards, and an atmosphere of celebration that felt unjustly cheerful to investigators overseeing a search that had already exceeded the standard window of hopeful retrieval. The victim, 22-year-old college senior Amanda Ray, had vanished just days before Christmas Eve. Her absence was first noted by neighbors who assumed she had gone home for winter break like most of the students at her apartment complex near Bricktown. She had been seen walking from the university library carrying 2 books on environmental policy, a winter coat dusted with sleet, and a schedule that suggested nothing out of routine. The disappearance was initially quiet, the kind that law enforcement is familiar with during holiday turnover, when young adults travel across the country and communication gaps are common. Amanda's roommate had returned late from a Thanksgiving trip to Wichita and remembered a note on the counter written in hurried handwriting. She had planned to finish finals requirements and then shop for gifts near Penn Square Mall. Credit card records showed one transaction at a small coffee kiosk and nothing else. No hotel check-ins, no transit tickets, no medical visits, no contact with relatives. In holiday seasons, Oklahoma City police receive dozens of distress calls from parents who cannot reach adult children, but this one was different in packing and absence. Detectives personally spoke to cashiers, baristas, campus librarians, and security personnel from December 19 to December 23. Amanda simply dissolved from public view. Winter storms that year swept across the Midwest, causing power outages and delayed reporting cycles. Holiday news coverage shifted toward travel disruption and retail season projections, leaving Amanda's case overshadowed except for a few small newspaper blurbs reminding readers of the missing student. Posters were printed on unlaminated paper due to holiday budget constraints, taped to iced poles near Main Street, and pinned to church bulletin boards. The story would have remained a brief seasonal entry, if not for the digital file inside that unclaimed storage unit nearly a year later. Before that discovery, law enforcement followed standard missing person protocol. Records from the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation indicated a timeline anchored by library CCTV footage, confirming Amanda exited at 6:42 p.m. with weather advisories warning of slick roads that night. An interview with a shuttle driver pointed to her choosing to walk instead of wait. The path from campus to her apartment crossed dim residential streets decorated with inflatable Santas and icicle lights that clung to gutters. Temperatures recorded at the Will Rogers Airport Station showed wind chill dropping below 15 degrees. Forensic specialists later noted that cold weather complicates scent tracking and cellular battery retention, making early search efforts even more fragile. By Christmas morning, the city moved forward with festive parades and televised Christmas Eve broadcasts, but the Ray family remained in Oklahoma City instead of returning to Tulsa. The apartment complex access logs confirmed Amanda never used her key fob beyond the timestamp before she walked to the library. A maintenance worker remembered her asking about heating issues earlier in the week, a detail that would later matter only symbolically. While volunteers combed tree-lined streets, sleet hardened footprints and tire marks until they became indistinguishable from older impressions embedded in snow. Spring arrived with campus graduations that left one seat empty on the registry. The missing person case transitioned to a cold classification by late summer of 2004. Amanda's college transcripts were archived with a pending status, her scholarship file frozen, and her belongings placed in a police-monitored storage container until the legal custodian timeline expired. Her mother continued leaving a porch light on through every holiday from Thanksgiving through New Year, a ritual attested in neighborhood interviews and later recounted in court summaries. The true turning point, however, came not from renewed search efforts but from a cybercrime audit. Federal agencies had begun sweeping digital registries tied to abandoned rentals in the Oklahoma corridor due to unrelated tax violations. One rental flagged was a storage locker near a discount outlet on the edge of downtown, payments delinquent since early winter. When the contents were inventoried, most items were unremarkable. Outdated textbooks, thrift store cookware, 2 plastic bins of holiday decorations still labeled with price tags from Target's after-Christmas sale bins. But authorities found one sealed electronics case wedged behind the plastic nativity set, containing a laptop with a boot sector lock and an external drive mirroring the same encryption pattern. The locker ID traced back to a former adjunct statistics instructor at the university, a man with no criminal history, but a pattern of mid-semester resignations. He had vacated without forwarding information, his lease ending 2 weeks before the locker fell into arrears. Investigators requested a warrant to bypass the encryption due to the missing person flag tied to the locker's registration period. Months passed as federal decoding teams attempted to manage a backlog of similar retrievals, until early December 2004, almost exactly 1 year after Amanda Ray had vanished. Inside the recovered folder were time-stamped images of campus maps, scanned ID sign-ins, and one composed email draft never sent. It was written late on December 23, 2003. It referenced student performance panels, academic grievances, and an unnamed complaint filed by a young woman fitting Amanda's academic track. What made this digital entry more than circumstantial was a second subfolder containing pedestrian route overlays, transit wait times, and weather advisories downloaded for December evenings only. Federal analysts concluded that whoever owned the drive had monitored movement patterns of a small set of students during winter nights, including Amanda's regular library-to-apartment route. The missing person investigation, dormant for 10 months, reopened with the urgency of Christmas week all over again. The university issued sealed compliance orders granting access to archived faculty evaluations and grievance records. Amanda had filed no direct complaint, but her faculty emails showed tension with one adjunct instructor who had repeatedly requested off-hours consultations. Nothing in the exchange was inappropriate by code, but the tone was persistent. Winter interviews with students who had taken the same course described him as brilliant, private, socially unanchored, and often spending late hours in the statistics lab, even when university buildings reduced schedules for holiday cleaning shifts. Investigators re-examined security camera clips from December 19 through December 22, focusing not on Amanda but on background presence. The same faculty member appeared exiting the library side door within minutes of each sighting of her recorded departure, coat collar lifted, face partially obscured by scarf and wind. No interaction was evident, but the timing pattern matched the mapping files from the storage drive. The geographic overlays of her walking routes corresponded with faculty parking access records. He had parked on side streets rather than university lots, where his departure would not have been logged. The anonymous email that gives this case its title arrived on December 24, 2004. It was forwarded from a campus general address containing no sender ID, no signature, and a single sentence referencing the storage locker seizure and the digital timestamp file. The message claimed the adjunct had returned to Oregon, his home state. IP tracing was blocked by routing loops, but the phrasing indicated internal academic familiarity. Detectives flew to Oregon, locating the instructor living quietly near a community college where he had recently applied for a part-time posting. Winter snow blanketed his rented bungalow and Christmas lights flickered on adjacent houses, while new investigators conducted routine questioning supported by interstate warrants. He denied any connection, citing whether coincidences and student confidentiality. Yet metadata from the recovered files placed all downloads within his campus office login credentials. A judge granted a more expansive forensic audit. In January 2005, chemical residue testing on a jacket from the storage locker revealed trace compounds consistent with winter roadway salt used near Amanda's apartment corridor during that specific storm week, narrowing the window further and aligning his documented presence with her final recorded movements. The investigation, though slow, gained unbroken momentum through that holiday cycle, returning a sense of attention to Amanda's name that had been missing since the winter she disappeared. It would be the final Christmas her family spent awaiting resolution. The next year would bring it. The renewed investigative efforts moved into the first weeks of 2005, with measured restraint rather than dramatic seizure. Federal analysts compiled chained login data, tracing each map download and timestamp request to the adjunct instructor's administrative profile during winter break hours, when laboratories should have been closed or monitored by limited custodial personnel. The timing aligned with nights when Amanda walked alone through lightly crowded campus sidewalks, passing wreath-lit doors and closed bookstore windows. What had once been considered random winter overlap transformed into distinct behavioral tracking when compiled into one cohesive timeline. Investigators also accessed archived building entry logs, which confirmed the instructor had remained in computer labs past midnight on December 19, December 21, and December 22, with badge swipe records corresponding to the exact evenings Amanda left the library on foot. The image overlays on the drive, previously viewed as mere academic templates, were reclassified as movement surveillance projections. Forensic teams noted that accuracy of predicted route times matched the weather delays reported across local meteorological data. What initially seemed like broad research patterns now resembled targeted observation of a specific individual whose disappearance occurred within that narrow temporal frame. The digital evidence strengthened in February, when forensic code specialists uncovered a deleted folder embedded beneath encryption layers. The file contained calendar entries marked with holiday icons, including December 23, flagged with the note "Final Review." While the phrase meant nothing in isolation, contextual analysis revealed that his own resignation email had been timestamped 1 day later on December 24. The resignation lacked typical professional closure statements, listing no forwarding contact, no gratitude for departmental association, only a one-line message referencing winter relocation. Detectives assembled a psychological timeline, noting how abrupt voluntary separation near Christmas often indicates avoidance rather than personal transition. The state attorney's office secured permission to cross-reference his travel receipts, finding that he had purchased bus passage northwest 2 days after Amanda's disappearance, returning briefly to Oklahoma only once in late January to clear the storage unit and remove digital equipment. It was that hurried relocation and incomplete removal that produced the fatal mistake, leaving one encrypted drive behind. A parallel investigative track opened with interviews from former students who recalled his unusual holiday office hours. They described him seated in dim cubicle light, working quietly as snow fell outside faculty windows. Campus hallways during finals week often empty by dusk, leaving a handful of international students and late researchers navigating quiet academic floors lined with poinsettias. One student remembered him referencing predictive modeling of mobility frequencies, phrasing later mirrored in the digital map overlays. Nothing illegal was vocalized, but the thematic alignment between academic interest and specific tracking detail became harder to dismiss. Holiday closures and reduced staff presence provided a silent corridor of opportunity. Amanda, focused on final assignments and last-minute study hours, likely understood her nightly route as routine rather than observed. In March of 2005, Oklahoma City detectives collaborated with Oregon state prosecutors to conduct extended questioning. Weather during that trip remained appropriately symbolic: winter thaw, melting snowbanks, and damp evergreen streets. The instructor remained calm, composed, and professionally distant during inquiry sessions. He provided standard explanations for each suspicious element: route mapping as academic modeling, late hours as grading demand, relocation as family necessity. But forensic accountants discovered discrepancies within his university email deletion logs. While faculty typically allowed automated archiving, he had manually purged all correspondence from December 18 through December 25, the precise interval covering Amanda's disappearance. The purge did not constitute proof of criminal act by itself, but when paired with encrypted data possession, unsent draft referencing grievance timing, and geographic surveillance files, it formed sufficient probable cause. A search warrant authorized retrieval of his Oregon residence computing devices. Within the attic storage box, investigators located 2 external drives mirroring file structures of the abandoned Oklahoma locker device. The drives contained winter weather logs, forecast patterns, and time-stamped walk time predictions, identical to campus-to-apartment duration, along Amanda's last known route. Embedded in metadata was the original creation date of December 14, 2003, 8 days before she vanished. The weather patterns indicated wind estimates, streetlight intervals, and freeze potential along sidewalks nearest her apartment district. The analyst team concluded the information was too precise to be academic demonstration alone. The break that transformed suspicion to confirmation came from a private transportation database crosscheck. Law enforcement reviewed taxi dispatch logs from December 2003 that had been digitized years after initial inquiry. One entry recorded a flagged cancellation request at 7:03 p.m. on December 19, matching the timeframe Amanda left the library. The cancellation user ID matched the adjunct's university email prefix. Detectives theorized he may have attempted transport arrangements around her walking schedule, possibly anticipating her route through predictive modeling rather than direct confrontation inside campus property. No violent implication was recorded. The data simply supported deliberate observation. By summer 2005, the digital evidence chain was formally aligned into prosecutorial sequence. The winter disappearance, once reduced to faded posters and holiday radio mentions, returned to center court in district proceedings. The Ray family attended hearings quietly, their expressions restrained beneath legal formality. The courtroom windows displayed faint remnants of late-season warmth, rather than the icy December that had defined their daughter's last days in public record. Forensic experts testified with absolute neutrality, describing code extraction, metadata layering, and temporal alignment of route monitoring. They avoided speculation and maintained strict procedural focus. It became clear that holiday circumstances, reduced campus oversight, and winter solitude had created an environment where surveillance went unnoticed. The defense argued absence of physical evidence, noting no direct contact, no confirmed encounter. Yet case law allowed substantial weight on digital premeditation when supported by deletion patterns and relocation timing. The state emphasized the encrypted drive left behind, the unsent email draft signaling awareness of oversight, and the precise download timestamps corresponding to Amanda's final documented route. A critical procedural moment occurred when the state introduced a final piece of evidence from the recovered drives, a document labeled post-term analysis, created on December 24, 2003, one day after presumed disappearance, containing student initials including AR and an entry reading, complete absence variable achieved. Though not violent or explicit, linguistic context strongly suggested outcome acknowledgement rather than mere academic phrasing. Its presence, paired with immediate resignation, formed the prosecutorial hinge. The court delivered its verdict in early winter 2005, nearly 2 years from the night of disappearance. The instructor was convicted on charges of unlawful surveillance, interstate evidence concealment, and digital stalking under expanded federal cyberstalking statutes that had evolved rapidly in the early 2000s. Because no physical remains were ever recovered, the charge did not extend to homicide. Instead, the legal focus centered on premeditated tracking, resulting in disappearance under suspicious digital orchestration. Sentencing included long-term federal confinement due to interstate element and encryption obstruction. Amanda's case, though closed in procedural terms, retained solemn absence in its final record. The Ray family accepted judicial outcome with quiet resolve. Their home that year displayed one candle rather than full holiday decoration, recognizing the symbolic light they had maintained through consecutive Christmases, New Year's, and Thanksgivings. Oklahoma City campus installed updated winter escort systems, path illumination upgrades, and digital monitoring policies, preventing similar silent tracking conditions. The resolved investigation remained one of the most technically complex cold case digitization efforts in state record, demonstrating that resolution need not rely on dramatic discovery, but on patient forensic assembly across seasons when celebration usually eclipses vigilance. The closure of court proceedings did not immediately provide narrative clarity to the broader Oklahoma public. Winter news cycles in late 2005 carried brief segments summarizing the conviction, but offered no visual reenactments, no dramatic voiceovers, only a sterile recitation of charges related to electronic surveillance and disappearance. The case entered the cold archive section of the county courthouse, with a legal note indicating resolution, without physical retrieval. That distinction weighed heavily on a community that had searched in snow and sleet 2 years earlier, hopping for a return rather than a classification. The Ray family remained in Oklahoma City for several months after sentencing, packing Amanda's stored belongings with care. Her student notebooks, winter coat, and half-wrapped Christmas gifts were released to them under property return orders. Permanent closure in legal sense did not equate to lived emotional conclusion. Holidays remained altered. Throughout 2006, academic institutions across Oklahoma and neighboring states studied the investigative timeline, not for sensational narrative, but to refine winter campus safety protocols. Holiday periods at universities often create gaps in student visibility, with dorm vacancies, reduced shuttle schedules, and minimal library staffing. Oklahoma City University, along with the University of Central Oklahoma, implemented structured route monitoring rather than informal security presence. Blue emergency posts were added near streets where seasonal decorations once served as the only illumination. The map overlays found on the encrypted drives became a model for reverse engineering risk assessment. Instead of permitting silent tracking, the new system provided university-controlled path surveillance meant to guard rather than observe vulnerability. A public record request in spring 2006 revealed that the adjunct instructor's departure email had originally been timestamped at 4:12 a.m. on December 24, 2003, hours before Christmas Eve sunrise. The resignation happened while the city still slept under wind chill advisories, when early commuters had not yet scraped frost from car windshields. That timestamp subtly reinforced investigative interpretation, a rushed departure at a symbolic hour, preceding a holiday that typically anchors families indoors rather than moving across state lines. The court had permitted its introduction, but did not frame it as emotional implication. It stood simply as factual alignment. The digital forensics unit responsible for the encryption breakthrough published a technical paper in late 2006 detailing procedure rather than case narrative, focusing on layered key retrieval and recursive partition access on drives manufactured in early 2000s consumer formats. Students and technicians studying that report found parallels between data layers and psychological concealment, though the document itself avoided any interpretive language. Forensic specialists emphasize that future missing person investigations must preserve long-term access to seized digital assets, even when physical searches lose momentum. The Ray case had demonstrated that winter disappearance could be solved through archival patience rather than terrain discovery. Multiple retired detectives later noted that the decisive shift occurred from December environment to digital environment. During the first weeks of search, snowfall, closed roads, and holiday interruptions weakened physical pursuit. But 1 year later, a neglected storage locker delivered a different kind of terrain, electronic, time-stamped, immune to snow melt and seasonal decay. The digital folder names, while clinically labeled, carried the weight of holiday context in their dates alone. December 23, December 22, December 19. These were nights when the city turned inward toward festivity and warmth, when house windows glowed with trees and gift wrapping, while one young woman walked alone through icy sidewalks without knowledge of silent observation. A regional criminology conference in Oklahoma held a retrospective in 2007 centered on winter case attrition, identifying how holiday factors often reduce witness availability. On December nights, fewer pedestrians occupy streets, fewer commuters return late from work, fewer store clerks remain on shift. In Amanda's case, her disappearance occurred between semesters, when many peers had already gone home. The anonymous email that eventually guided investigators to Oregon arrived exactly 1 year later during the same seasonal interval, indicating that awareness of the timing extended beyond a single participant. Though the sender was never identified, linguistic analysis of the email ruled out family members, reporters, and known faculty. The phrasing suggested institutional familiarity, but intentionally avoided traceable identity. Some investigators suspected another academic observer who noticed abnormal data retention patterns but did not wish to become witness of record. The state made no attempt to unmask the sender, determining no legal necessity once conviction was secure. Thanksgiving of 2007 marked the first year the Ray family no longer attended court-linked memorials. Instead, they held a private gathering in Tulsa, away from Oklahoma City streets, where they had spent earlier holidays distributing missing posters printed on winter-damp paper that curled at corners on metal lampposts. Newspaper archives from December 2003 still contained small holiday classifieds adjacent to Amanda's photo, reminders of seasonal normalcy against the weight of absence. Those pages became part of permanent case display in the Oklahoma State Forensic Library, filed not as tragedy but as procedural lesson. In community recollection, the absence of physical recovery became both burden and quiet acceptance. Annual vigils faded without neglect, replaced by scholarship funds honoring Amanda's academic track in environmental policy. The fund supported winter field study students, intentionally linking future work to the season that had defined her final timeline. Donors included former professors, investigators, and city administrators who had witnessed the case unfold through multiple holiday cycles. Their contributions were not emotional gestures, but administrative acknowledgments of a case that shifted oversight expectations in winter months. Media retrospectives in 2008 covered the case briefly, focusing on legal precedent concerning digital stalking. Commentators noted that Amanda's case was among the earliest in Oklahoma to secure conviction by leveraging encrypted surveillance patterns rather than physical contact charges. The verdict expanded prosecutorial approach to digital presence during holiday isolation periods, acknowledging that disappearance need not involve overt force to constitute criminal orchestration. Legal commentators remained restrained, choosing language removed from sensational impact. The case did not lend itself to dramatic retelling, only systematic reconstruction. By 2010, Oklahoma City had installed route call systems offering winter escort lines for students leaving evening study halls. Amanda's library exit time, 6:42 p.m., became training example for new campus security staff. They memorized those minutes not for narrative gravity but as instructional prompt. Supervisors reminded them that December sundown occurs early, that cold air reduces public presence, and that winter silence should never be mistaken for safety. The city's Public Records Office eventually listed Amanda Ray not in open case category but resolved file index with note: digital resolution, no physical retrieval. The classification appeared clinical but honest. Finality in criminal systems often requires definitive detail, yet here, detail existed mainly in code sequences, timestamps, and the abruptness of December exits. The outcome rested not in discovery of remains nor confession, but in forensic certainty that silent tracking had occurred, recorded, encrypted, and stored until inadvertent exposure. The adjunct instructor continued to serve federal sentence through successive winters, his name largely absent from media and public discussion. His case drew no petitions, no appeals of national attention, no televised debate. It existed as a legal artifact sealed under procedural accuracy. When his sentencing report circulated to academic oversight committees, it emphasized misuse of analytical tools during holiday vulnerability periods rather than emotional motive speculation. The narrative remained void of theatrical conclusion. For Oklahoma City, winter returned each year with its familiar elements: frozen sidewalks from Bricktown to the University District, holiday garlands in street lamp halos, early darkening skis. The Ray home continued placing a single candle near the window through December, no longer a vigil but a seasonal marker of lived history. The courthouse retained the encrypted drive that shifted the case's trajectory, stored in climate-controlled evidence shelving, labeled without fanfare. It remained available for future forensic study, but not public display. In the quiet cycle of holidays that followed, Amanda's name remained most present in institutional training guides and campus winter advisories. Her case demonstrated that disappearance in festive season requires investigative endurance beyond initial snowfall and gift wrapping. It also confirmed that even absent physical evidence, resolution can emerge through overlooked archives, a forgotten storage unit, and an anonymous email sent during the same cold stretch of December that first stole her from visibility. Winter cycles in Oklahoma City eventually resumed their predictable cultural rhythm, but the investigative community retained Amanda Ray's name as part of procedural doctrine rather than public memorialization. Her case became a teaching instrument for federal, state, and academic forensic units, studying the interaction between holiday vulnerability and methodical pre-disappearance observation. Scholars examining digital criminology described the investigative arc as a non-physical cold case, one solved without recovered remains, confession, or eyewitness accounts, relying instead on quiet data traces embedded in forgotten hardware and the unintentional persistence of encrypted logs. To the trained reader of such records, Amanda's absence was never simply the silence after Christmas lights dimmed. It was the product of designed watchfulness intersecting with seasonal isolation, a convergence that would alter winter patrol and digital privacy policy across multiple campuses. By late 2011, state case reviews classified the conviction as stable, meaning no appeals of procedural integrity or forensic method threatened to reopen trial components. The encrypted storage devices, once subject of urgent decoding, now existed as dormant exhibits cataloged in climate-controlled evidence stacks alongside holiday-dated search warrants and surveillance map printouts. Nothing dramatic remained, only careful preservation. The Ray family requested that no items be displayed publicly or used for media instruction. Their approach reflected the same quiet restraint that characterized each stage of their involvement. The city complied without hesitation, aware that the absence itself had become part of the resolution. Through early 2012, Oklahoma's higher education network finalized its winter security reform. University safety boards adopted structured digital access protocols, forbidding faculty retention of off-hour surveillance data and installing route-specific escort monitoring across December weeks, when campus thinning left students traveling alone after sunset. Some administrators noted that before Amanda Ray's disappearance, December nights on campus were viewed with sentimental normality, decorated halls, shortened finals, peppermint coffee near library corners. After the case, those same corridors became coded zones requiring verification of safe transit, not because threat was assumed, but because opportunity for unnoticed observation had once existed there without countermeasure. Local legal seminars continued referencing the case during holiday months, not in sensational highlight, but as an example of technological quiet becoming criminal infrastructure. The file name, complete absence variable achieved, introduced during trial, remained the most cited phrase, not because of its coldness, but because it illustrated how academic language could disguise situational finality. Yet officials rarely repeated it aloud in public sessions. It remained a record entry, not rhetorical device. The community preferred structural outcome, not linguistic reflection. In 2013, a statewide digital audit task force formed to examine abandoned storage rentals each January, when unpaid holiday units historically rose due to seasonal relocation. The task force would not have existed without the near-accidental discovery that altered Amanda's case trajectory. Abandoned storage spaces had long been considered peripheral to missing person investigations, mere repositories of spilled lives rather than sources of resolution. But her case dismantled that assumption. A single overlooked drive, wedged behind plastic Christmas ornaments, had shifted a cold classification into a solvable one. The task force's work became routine by 2014, expected, unremarkable. Most units contained only box decorations, old textbooks, winter coats left behind by transient renters. None repeated Amanda's data relevance, though investigators never forgot that one had. By 2015, news outlets no longer referenced the case directly, but instead cited the broad category 2003 Oklahoma digital cold case closure in legal summary lists. That phrasing, impersonal and almost clinical, reflected precisely how the city chose to hold the outcome. Closure existed without spectacle. The name of the convicted adjunct instructor remained sealed from public discourse beyond required registries. He served his sentence under federal oversight, each winter resembling the one that first prompted his evacuation from Oklahoma City. No later interviews, no retrospective editorial features, no commemorative broadcasts emerged to reopen narrative. The state's relationship to the case was procedural, not commemorative. When the Ray family relocated permanently to Colorado in 2016, their departure was recorded only in property transfer logs and quiet University Foundation updates. The scholarship fund in Amanda's name continued distributing winter environmental research grants with neutral administrative rhythm. Recipients rarely knew the case context, and the Foundation Committee chose not to emphasize it. The purpose was not memorial sorrow, but academic continuation. Amanda's coursework, interrupted days before academic recess, lived forward indirectly through thesis projects on river systems, urban freeze management, and sustainable winter infrastructure. That continuity reflected the most grounded form of resolution available, the transformation of academic interruption into academic extension. Public memory of Amanda shifted by absence rather than presence. She became a caution in cyber forensic curriculum, a name spoken in closed seminar rooms where analysts discussed early digital stalking parameters. In those sessions, her disappearance was not framed in emotive tones but informational caution. Winter months produce observational blind spots. Encrypted drives require persistent decoding. Disappearance without physical trace demands extended patience. Trainees learned not the emotion of the case, but the structure of its unraveling. Despite public quiet, December each year returned the facts to private consciousness of those who had touched the investigation. Retired officers recalled snow-laden parking lots outside precinct offices lit by holiday bulbs while they reviewed case files late into Christmas week. Forensic staff remembered the cold hum of evidence room fans maintaining precise temperature control over the drives that held the timeline. Court administrators recalled the subtle seasonal contrast during sentencing when courthouse wreaths and red ribbons stood in silent juxtaposition to legal finality. The season remained embedded in every procedural recollection, not because it heightened tragedy, but because it structured the delay, shaped the search, and framed the eventual solution. Over time, the anonymous email that initiated the final pursuit phase gained lesser emphasis than analysts once expected. Its absence of signature became part of its identity. It was neither confession nor denunciation, but correction. It nudged stalled comprehension toward archived hardware and forgotten timestamp files. It represented an unseen hand willing to direct without owning outcome. Investigators later concluded that the sender may have been someone peripheral, not involved, only observant, a colleague aware of unusual off-hour accesses, someone who recognized that December surveillance mapping exceeded academic modeling. Without proof, no further speculation endured. The email remained an unresolved participant, but not a necessary one. By 2020, Oklahoma City had undergone multiple cycles of winter safety recalibration. New students, born after the disappearance, walked across decorated December campuses unaware that their illuminated paths and extended shuttle hours originated in response to one student who did not complete her winter walk home. The city's memory of Amanda existed mainly in administrative detail: escort service manuals, encryption training modules, evidence catalogs. Her name occasionally reappeared only in grant announcements for environmental study, unlinked from disappearance, connected instead to academic contribution. Years later, when frost again coated metal railings outside courthouse steps and holiday closings sent most indoor, an archivist reviewing end-of-year retention schedules paused over the entry: Ray, Amanda M., resolved, digital evidence retained. No dramatic recollection followed, no emotional reflex. The archivist simply noted the permanence of retention, kept not because case mystery persisted, but because its conclusion rested in a form of record that required indefinite preservation. Encryption, by nature, demands future readability. The devices remained because procedure demanded they never again slip into forgotten storage. The final echo of the case, if one existed, lived not in unresolved grief, but in the rewritten protocols that ensured winter silence could no longer disguise vigilant oversight. Campus lights stayed on longer now. Shuttle loops ran through nights when once they shut down before dinner. Faculty access after semester close required formal clearance rather than assumed trust. December, once considered academically dormant, became a monitored interval. Amanda Ray's disappearance had not provoked mass reform or public outcry. It had revealed quiet structural need. Its resolution, devoid of physical discovery, existed in the steady accumulation of data clarity, an encrypted drive thawed from forgotten holiday dust, and the unheralded moment when winter investigation pivoted from search in snow to search in code. If Oklahoma City carried anything forward into each new December, it was not commemorative sorrow but procedural steadiness, a recognition that stillness in festive months can hold more than celebration. In that recognition, the case reached its final, subdued aftermath, solved, filed, retained, and understood not by what was found, but by what could no longer remain unseen.